These unconventional times require unconventional conversations. Listen in as your host, Richard Gordon, engages in one-on-one conversations with numerous leaders, elected officials, politicians, and others to learn what's happening in your state, on the Hill, and across America. Now, here's the host of Unconventional Times, Richard Gordon.
Hello, and welcome to Unconventional Times. I'm your host, Richard Gordon, and it's nice to have you with us today. You know, these have been some pretty topsy-turvy days. The market has gone up and down a few times. It went down about 750 points yesterday, another 250 today. It went up the other day. But where are we? What's going on? And what is going to happen internationally to the United States as we deal with the tariff issue and so many other big issues facing the country? Today, we're very lucky to have a great guest and a great friend of mine, Tim Roemer. Former Congressman from Indiana, the 3rd District. For those of you who don't know, that's South Bend. He served for 6 terms. He was our ambassador to India under President Obama. And he also was on the 9/11 Commission. All issues that I want to talk to him about. But first, Tim's an old friend. So what I really want to ask him is, Tim, we know each other pretty well. Tell me something I don't know about you.
Rich, I think with that generous introduction, my mom would have loved it, and maybe your audience is smiling a little bit. Most important stuff about me, Rich, is my wife Sally and I've been married for 36 years. I adore her. Best decision I ever made, and boy, am I way over my head in marriage. We got 4 wonderful kids: Patrick, Matthew, Sarah, and Grace. And they're all smarter and better looking than me, which makes me happy looking at them around the kitchen table all the time. We got a rescue dog named Willie. I know you've got a dog too. I love my dog. I think he likes me a lot too. We hang out a lot together. And looking at your books, I am a book collector. And
you collect first editions, I understand, right?
Well, they're way too expensive, so I don't have too many of them. Can't afford that. But I do try to get some of the first editions, and just love that. Whether it's a first edition, Theodore Roosevelt wrote about 27 books. I have about 21 of his either first, second, or third editions, going back to 18. I think his first one, the Naval War of 1812, was written in 1883. So having that book and my admiration, I know you like Teddy Roosevelt a lot too, the Bull Moose. Fun to have those books around and then recommend them to people and share them with people. I'm a walking library. I loan people books all the time, usually get them back, but if I don't, no big deal.
That's great. I have a book that I think you'd really love. I bought it in a converted armory. That's where you find books, right?
That's where the treasures are.
And I bought it in Rhode Island many years ago. It's a leather-bound book with gilded pages. The edges are all gilded, and it's about the first ladies. And very interesting little stories about all the first ladies. It ends with Mrs. McKinley. So it'll tell you about when the book was written. It was probably written about 1920, and it ends. I remember the parts reading about Mrs. Garfield being told about her husband being, shot, and then Mrs. McKinley, a similar type of thing. But it's just such the beauty of the book, not just the writing, but the physical beauty of this.
Holding that book and admiring the book cover and the binding, and
it's thick. It's huge.
Yeah. And they're heavy. Yeah. That's the way books were made back then. They weren't made, with cheap pages. The pages will last forever and ever and ever. And, you admire some of the more recent books, the art on the book cover, the dust jacket, as it's called. You get a first edition of something like Catch-22 or The Catcher in the Rye or To Kill a Mockingbird.
Right.
Those dust covers are worth as much as the book is.
I have an old copy of both of The Catcher in the Rye and To Kill a Mockingbird up there. Not a first edition, but old editions. So,
Great books.
it's interesting because when you talk to people about books now, uh, one, people don't read the way they used to. Well, that's one thing. And then the second thing about books is, people read them online, on Kindles, on all types of things. And I don't know if people develop the libraries that they used to have. And I'm probably a lot like you. When I'm at someone's house, I always love to go
Oh,
into
I
the
sneak.
conversation.
I got to go to the bathroom, Rich, and sneak into your library, look around, see what you're reading, how you got them organized. How's
Right,
that dust jacket on Truman? Is it good shape? Or
right.
is it red at all? Does it show a little love and
I
a little?
sometimes I sometimes take the jacket off when I read.
Yeah, that's preserving that precious dust jacket.
Yeah, so they're great, and I agree with you. You always have to be reading. So what are you reading now?
I'm reading. I just got done with a book that I will recommend if we get to that stage at the end of your podcast. I'm reading and just finished the fourth volume of Lyndon Baines Johnson by Robert Caro. And it's, the path to power, the access to power, the
Right,
master of the Senate, and how LBJ identifies power. He can watch somebody walk into a room and there are 18 people in that room. And he says, my father could identify power as soon as it walked into the room and then how to use it. So, what's fascinating about this, Rich, is that, through this 4 volume series, you see the goodness that power can do
hmm,
when LBJ passed the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of
right.
1964 and 65, Medicaid, Medicare, Head Start. He leveraged that power and he was vicious about it at times, threatening other senators and congresspeople to do good. And then he mangled that power in Vietnam and lost everything and lost his presidency. And so it's a fascinating story of how power can be used for good and for justice and bettering America, and then how it can be neglected or not used the right way or lust for and lost, and then the consequences of that, such as the Vietnam War.
Well, one of the things about Johnson I've always found most fascinating is just the concept of leadership and the way he was able to do things. You look at him and, you wouldn't think someone from Texas, from even the part of Texas he was from, would do the Civil Rights Act, would do the Voting Rights Act, would do some of the things he did, but also the leadership in getting people to agree with you and come along with you, even people who really disagreed with him. And sometimes I think he was a little heavy-handed in how he did it. But that's how you get the job done.
That's how you get the job done. There's a great quote toward the end of the fourth volume. It says, John Kennedy was a man of eloquence who made men think. Lyndon Baines Johnson was a man of the hammer who made men act.
Good line. Good
Great
point.
way, great way to look at two individuals, their strengths and weaknesses, perseverance and grit, and power.
Right, right. Hey, have you ever read and I promise you, we're going to get to the rest of the stuff in a sec, but have you ever read the Dumas Malone, you'd probably enjoy this, the series of books he did on Jefferson?
I have read a little bit of reviews of them, but I've not read the books.
Yeah, they're great. And I've bought them, the old
Only from a
copies.
UVA guy would be selling this as
Well, of course, a UVA guy would be selling Thomas Jefferson books, but I've bought them in the weirdest places. Like I found one in like the Boise airport. They have a bookstore, and I bought one there. And yeah, I had them on the shelf here. But yeah, you can't get a bad book on Mr. Jefferson. So agreed. You got me. Let me ask you a couple of questions on other things while we're together. Um, you have seen tariffs in a way that the rest of us don't, right? I mean, you have seen it. You've been a member of Congress. You've worked on these issues, but you've also been our ambassador to India. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But I'm just interested in your take on the tariff situation. What's going on? Where are we going? And what's this really mean?
so. Rich, I think for your viewers and listeners, it's important to understand what a tariff is. And I didn't really understand specifically how they worked until I got to Congress. And then I really understood them when I was a US ambassador. So tariffs are a tax put on product that is coming, let's say, from China to India. It's coming into California. And as soon as it comes in, the US importer, let's say it's Nike, bringing in $100 shoe that you or I might want to buy at the local store, they put a 50% tax on that now. That shoe goes up to $125,
Right.
25, 130 with taxes then. And that importer pays to get those shoes into the country. And then they sell them in my hometown of South Bend, Indiana, but it's not going to be for $100. That businesswoman or businessman is going to say, I had to pay this extra 25 or 30 bucks on this import tax. I'm going to pass that on to the consumer. I'm not going to eat that as part of my profit. So the Chinese government is not paying that tax. US businesses are paying that tax, but passing it on to you and me and to our families. So
it's a tax on me.
It's a tax on us. It is a Trump tariff tax on all of us, whether it's washing machines, tires, shoes, cars. Yesterday, let's use an example of the tariff.
Sure.
Trump has slapped tariffs across the board on almost every country, even if we have a surplus with them. He's done it on autos. Front page of the newspaper yesterday, Rich, and you will recognize the name of this town, Kokomo, Indiana.
Of course.
Which is right on my district, in Indiana. I represented that area in Congress.
A lot of car businesses.
Car business. They make the Jeep Cherokee there.
Right.
They announced yesterday, front page all over Indiana papers, 375 people laid off their jobs because of the tariff, the Trump tax tariff. They're gone. Those jobs are now gone. 375 hardworking, middle-class Hoosiers don't have jobs. Now, hopefully, the president will come to his senses and say, I need to negotiate with China or Mexico, whoever it might be in this instance. We all want fair trade. We all want to make sure the middle class and blue-collar people, Americans, do better in fair trade and free trade. But we don't want to do it in a way that increases inflation in our country or that eliminates jobs in America or does both and causes our economy to go into either stagflation or inflation. So, or the stock market, as you mentioned in your opening, is dropping. If you've got $50,000 in your 401k, that's probably about $36,000 today. That's a big loss for us average people. Yeah.
But I have a couple questions. What's the theory? Why do you, quote unquote, allegedly punish your friends? Why do you put a tariff on India? Why do you put a tariff on Brazil? We all drink coffee. Why do we put a tariff on our friends? I understand a bit about the politics of this, the cosmetic politics of it, I should say, because it's not real. But why do you punish India, Brazil, people Canada, Mexico, we could go through the list, but why do you do this on them? Why isn't it just a targeted tariff on, let's say, people who are allegedly hurting us, China, for example? And there's no tariff on Russia.
I think the president has made a huge mistake. He won the 2024 election fair and square. He won every swing state. I was out in many of those swing states campaigning for Kamala Harris, who ran against him. We lost fair and square. But I heard over and over, knocking on doors in Pittsburgh or Lansing or Philadelphia, people saying, I want somebody to do something about the economy. I don't have a good job anymore. I'm driving an Uber when I used to be in a steel plant. I'm making a half of what I used to, and my kids don't have a future. That's a gut punch, Rich, for you and me who have kids, any American, if you utter the words, my kids don't have a shot at the American dream anymore, that's like giving up. So they didn't elect Trump to put tariffs on every country in the world and jack up our prices on cars, on computers, on toys, on eggs, whatever it might be. They elected them to grow our economy, to create a fairer economy for middle class and blue collar workers. Now, if I was advising him, I would say, don't put tariffs on countries like Singapore and Great Britain, who we have a trade surplus with,
Right. Right.
but put them on China. Democrats and Republicans would support that. Why put them on China? Because all the way back in 2016, and you may remember this, China pledged to buy a lot of American
Exactly.
soybeans and corn from our Indiana farmers and Midwestern farmers, other products. Rich, they never did it. They promised to buy things, let those products into their market. They never did it. They never followed through. That's when you use tariffs as a punitive hammer on somebody and you say, you're not playing by fair and free trade rules. We are going to hammer you now. But you don't go out and hammer everybody ahead of time and say to the world, we're going to be your enemy on trade and we're going to collapse the stock market across the world and slow growth for everybody. That doesn't make sense.
But it seems to me also that from the political perspective, they talk about tariffs in a way that from what you're saying, Tim, it doesn't seem to be true. For example, they make it sound like we're punishing these other countries, that these other countries have been unfair to us, and therefore we are going to punish them. For example, let's forget China for a minute, but our tariff on a country is significantly lower than their tariff on us. And this is a way of being punitive to them and punishing them. From what you're saying, that just isn't true. And then second of all, they use tariffs as a way of discussing reducing, our national debt, that the federal government is going to collect so much money from this that we are going to pay down the debt. First of all, is that true? And second of all, based on what you just said, if it is true, well, then I'm paying down the national debt, right? Because what's happening is I am paying more for those Nike sneakers you just spoke about. It's my money in essence that's going eventually in a way back to the federal government. It may be the importer who's doing it, but by my continually buying his sneakers, I'm giving him the money to do it. So
No,
it just
from
seems
what I
convoluted to
understand,
me.
Rich, and I may be slightly off on this. I think what the Trump administration is going to do is a double tax on you. I think what they're going to
How
do is
so?
they're going to tax the tire, the car, the toy, the computer coming into the country, increasing the cost directly to US businesses and to us as consumers. That revenue then that they collect on that import into our country goes to the border. I think it goes to a version of the border control and the IRS. What the Republican Congress then wants to do is what I'm hearing is use revenue. Let's say that generates $200 billion. They want to use that revenue to pay for their tax cuts in
Mm,
the budget reconciliation bill coming up.
right.
So it's from what I hear from Republicans in Congress, that money is not going to go to reduce the deficit. That's going to help pay for the cost of their tax cuts. And therefore, we pay the tax on the import coming in, and we pay for the tax cuts that we maybe will get coming up in a tax bill perspective. We don't know what that tax bill is going to look like yet because it won't pass probably for 6 to 12 months. It is totally, shell gaming the money and, doing kind of games with it and not being fair to all of us as taxpayers.
It sounds like they're taking the money from us. They're coming to our house, they're taking the money away, and then they're giving it back to us and saying, "Look what I gave you." But it's
Well,
my money.
you may not have them knock on your door to give you back the tax. We don't know what those tax cuts are going to look like.
Sure.
I don't know if somebody making $75,000 a year living in Indiana, are they going to get a $5,000 tax cut, but they're going
Right.
to pay $2,000 more for their car coming in with the tariffs. They're going to pay $200 more for their washing machine. They're going to pay $3,000 more for their groceries. So they may lose on this. I
Well,
don't know yet. It all depends on
how
how
it shakes
long the
out.
tariffs stay in and what kind of tax cut they eventually pass.
The other thing that they say, and again, Tim, you're perfectly situated for this, being a congressman from the third district there. A lot of manufacturing that has left the state of Indiana, has left the United States. There's an argument that this will bring manufacturing back. Do you see that? How would that work in your former district?
Yes, and here's where I think the Democrats need a better message. We need to be talking to our American voters about restoring the American dream. We need a simple, succinct, really catchphrase way of saying to blue collar workers, black, white, Latino, women, men, whoever they might be, we're going to help you and your family economically achieve opportunity and responsibility in your dreams. If you play by the rules, we want to help you. That and visualize this, Rich. The American dream for you and me has been a ladder to climb up. I come from a middle class family in South Bend, Indiana. Worked my way through college, paid for it, worked my way through graduate school, paid for it. And my dad and mom kept saying, you got to work, you got to work. That's the American ethic. But when you needed a student loan, there was a ladder there to climb up on, and government would help you with a loan that you had to repay at 7% or whatever it was. And if I was a worker, a welder in a steel plant, and I got hurt, there was a Social Security disability payment for me and my family, another rung in that ladder. And then there's another rung for Head Start families, kids that come from poor areas of South Bend, get their kids off to an early start in education. Much better to spend $2,000 on educating that kid in early elementary education than $27,000 incarcerating that kid later on in prison. Easy math. So there's a ladder. There are rungs in the ladder. But today, Rich, the ladder is broken. The rungs are rusted. Most people are not believing that dream's there for them anymore. Democrats need to be able to convince them, here's how we restore opportunity for all people. We don't guarantee everybody gets to the top of the ladder, but we're going to give everybody a chance to get on the ladder. Fair, square, and simple. And Trump uses tariffs to say, I'm going to drive manufacturing out of China back to Indiana with a tariff, with a tax, the Trump tariff tax. I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think President Biden started this by rebuilding America, roads, bridges, railways, portways, making us potentially the strongest country in the world because our infrastructure works. Our businesses are productive that way. We travel, we get places fast. We have an efficient capitalistic economy. We beat the Chinese at their own game. And we outproduce them, we outwork them. Biden also invested in building manufacturing in America again with EV plants, with chip producing plants, these chips now that are primarily made in Taiwan that go into our toasters, our washing machines, our toys. And by the way, Rich, our fighter jets, our aircraft carriers, our drones, everything in national security, we got to make them here in our country. We want Americans making them. If China ever attacked Taiwan and shut off those chips from us, it is a dire situation for our national security. Biden started that process. There are probably 25 to 50 plants that will eventually be built in our country, American jobs, American manufacturing. That's a big part of it. we are only as strong a country, and our national security is only as strong as our people, as we invest in our people and our economy and our education system and our ability to make things and send them out around the world, our ability to defend ourselves and defend our partners with a strong military, our ability to be moral people and people of character, to do the right thing in the world, to be just and merciful. Those are important things that we need to do to rebuild the heartland, like Indiana, recreate some of these jobs that have left and strengthen the country. Now, tariffs are a small piece of that. I would use tariffs on China, as I said before. It is not just a stick to hit them with, it's a hammer. It can be an effective, last resort to say to the Chinese, you don't let our hardworking Americans, when they build something well, when they grow something productively, you don't buy it. You won't even give us a chance to sell it in your marketplace, but we're doing that for you. No more. No more.
So the numbers don't have to be the same. It sounds like it doesn't have to be if you do a 10%, I have to do a 10%. They
They
can be
don't.
different
And
numbers.
it depends on the sector, Rich.
Yeah.
Agriculture is different from finished manufacturing goods or textile goods. There are ways to do this, to be smart about it and not just blanket the world with tariffs at anywhere from 10% to 134%. And you just kind of make them up day to day. And then you decide you're going to take some away, and the markets hate that uncertainty, and they react like they have the last 2 weeks, and people lose money in their 401ks and their investments and their kids' 529 accounts.
You brought up so many issues in your answer. I was going to get to this much later in our conversation, but you brought it up, so I'm going to raise it. So many of the things that you have said about President Biden, for example, electric vehicles, manufacturing, chips, whatever, they all seem to be on the cutting block these days. You look at so many of the things, the executive orders and whatnot that President Trump has done, and he seems to be targeting these. What's besides the fact that he doesn't like his predecessor, economically, what is the point? And is it going to turn the boat around, or is there still time to save these? Can they go forward in this climate? And I'll ask you a specific. Well, you
Yeah,
answer that, and then I
well,
have one right after.
it's a terrific question. I don't know that I know every detail to answer that question thoroughly, but I will tell you from what I do know that I don't know, something like 25 to 50% of these plants, chip plants, making the most sophisticated chips in the world, uh, some of the infrastructure, bridges and roads, some of the new car plants, whether they're hybrids or EVs or cars, whatever they might be. I think, somewhere between 25 and 50% of those will be built. The money's out. They've broken ground. They're starting these things, construction jobs. These are real construction jobs. They are real long-term jobs in manufacturing. Yeah, they're really good for America. Some of these are still waiting because our old friends in the Senate and the House have attached all kinds of different amendments to how these things will be funded, requirements on the funding, state issues, environmental issues,
Right.
regulatory issues. I think they went entirely way too far, Rich, in my opinion. It's held up these projects, and some of them may not get done. And then there's others that I think President Trump is going to fund because there are in red states. They're being built in places like Tennessee and Arizona, which is a swing state, and Mississippi. These are being built. He's not going to pull the plug on those
Right.
jobs and those manufacturing capabilities. He's going to be able to point to those things in 2 years and 3 years and say, I did that with my tariffs. Biden didn't do that with his bills. I did that. And so he's going to claim credit for things that Joe Biden should have been able to get credit for. I do have to say, Rich, that I would call the White House when they passed these three consequential bills, and I was ready to jump on somebody and not me pull my hair out, pull their hair out, because I'd say, you guys, let me congratulate you at the White House. You've just passed three or four of the most consequential bills since LBJ and FDR to make us a powerful country again. That's the good news. You want to hear the bad news? Nobody knows about it.
Right.
You have done a miserable job telling Americans in Indianapolis and Kokomo and South Bend and Evansville, they don't know what you've done. And so you're not going to get any credit for it. And you've done a
Why is
miserable
that?
job on this.
Yeah, why is that? I mean, was it them or was it, from the minute Joe Biden was elected president of the United States, it was merciless. He's too old. He doesn't know what's going on, whatever. It just seemed like there was so much noise that good noise couldn't get through.
That's a good way to put it. He did a lot. I wish I worked my tail for him, off for him in 2020. I was in Iowa. I was in New Hampshire, working to get him elected. And I wish he would have said 2 years in, after he's passed all this historic legislation, look at what I've done, the most successful one-term president in history. Now let's have an open primary. I'm not going to run again, one term. I've been vice president. I've been president. I've been a senator. I've got 45 plus years of serving my country, the blood, sweat, and tears. Everybody would have given him a standing ovation.
Absolutely.
Would have been
Yeah.
phenomenal. But like so many, Rich, and DC, the Senate and the House,
Yeah.
the governors, sometimes they don't know when to get victory and when to walk away. And they stay too long and they lose their mojo, and they lose their credibility, and then they lose some of the love that they've acquired
Absolutely.
over the years.
I usually ask this at the end, but I'll ask you now. You did not have this particular circumstances, but I've asked politicians of it for 30 years. Why is it so bad to lose? Why is it so bad to go out there and for Tim to say, this is what I want to do? And for Richard to say, I have a different idea. This is my idea. And we go to Kokomo and we talk to the people about it, and they pick Tim's idea, not my idea. Why is that so bad? Why are politicians so afraid to lose?
Well, you can't be. And, I learned when I won the seat the first time. I was lucky. We had the right people around us. We had a grassroots campaign. I did spaghetti suppers and fish fries and, you know, got $5 and $10 contributions from thousands of people. We had a group called Roamers that helped go around the community and do good projects and go door to door with me. I hit 25,000 doors every night for 18 months. It was the way you should run a campaign, listening to people and doing what they want you to do. And I learned, Rich, that winning wasn't everything. As Lombardi said in football, it is everything in
Right.
football. In politics, sometimes, especially when you've won, you have to be willing to lose. And what that means is you use that great honor and trust that people have given you in voting for you. It's one of the highest honors you can get in our country. To be elected from my hometown, from my home community people in Indiana is really is it as high a privilege and blessing as I can get in life to be rewarded with their trust and then go to Washington and they trust me to try to do the right thing is incredible. But you have to be able to say at times, I got to use this capital they've given me in ways where sometimes they might not like it, but it's the right vote, and I'm willing to lose on this vote if I can't explain it back home. And if they don't buy it, and if they don't believe me on this, they've got every right to vote me out of office. And making those tough votes, which I was certainly willing to do. And I represented a swing district where I had a lot of those types of votes that could have booted me out of office. But I never lost. And I was always communicating to people, here's why I did it. You might not like it. You might not always agree with me. Maybe you agree 4 out of 6 times with me. That's pretty good. But here's what I was thinking when I did it. And I'd be in a town meeting, Rich, telling them that. And most of them would say, okay, Tim, I'm coming to hear you from Wanata, Indiana, and I've driven up to LaPorte to this town meeting, and I trust you. Okay, I don't quite agree why you did that, but I trust you, and you showed up to tell me about it, and I'm going to give you another chance.
Why'd you walk away? Why'd you leave? Did
Well,
you
I
have
didn't.
enough, or you
I
just
didn't walk away. I think most people think, you're in your 40s. I got elected at 32, which
you're
was
a young man?
really young.
Yeah,
I'd been in the Senate as a staffer for 5 years,
right.
so I'd been in public service.
With
And
Senator DeConcini, right?
Senator DeConcini, a
Right.
Democrat from Arizona, I learned a lot from him in my time working in the Senate, learning how the legislative process works. And then I went home to South Bend to run for Congress, ran 6 times, beat a Republican, never lost, kept the seat. I now find myself, Rich, I'm about 44 years old, 45 years old. I've been in public service my entire life, starting as an intern at 17.
Right.
I've got 4 kids now.
4 kids. Yeah.
My wife is starting to tell me, and don't feel sorry for her, this is not a sympathy story. She would tell me during our time in Congress at times, hey, listen, we can't afford to put braces on the kids' teeth. We got to wait 3 months. That's probably like most American families, having to make decisions
Sure.
on your budget to delay things, or, and we thought, we have had such a great run. I'm flying back and forth between South Bend and Washington all the time. I do miss some baseball games and some plays and some things for my kids every now and then, although they're always been my priority. I'm going to get out of politics for a while, and I'm going to try the private sector. All my friends tell me how great it is. It's capitalism, and maybe, Tim, you can make a little money in it and get your kids to college someday. And so I left politics, but not really leaving politics. I mean, I worked on 3 more presidential campaigns. I was a U.S. ambassador to India. I served on the 9/11 Commission and 3 or 4 other blue ribbon commissions. I've never been out of it, Rich. I stay in it, and I love it. You'll never take politics out of me.
What I tell people is there's so many different ways to serve. So many people think that service is only elective life, and it's not elective life. And there's ways you could
Right.
serve your country in so many different aspects of it. And I think people sometimes lose sight of that. Look, I want to be somewhat sensitive here to your time. I have so many things I want to talk to you about. Let's talk about India if we can. You mentioned being ambassador. First of all, what was it like when the president called you and told you you were going to be the next ambassador to India?
Well, it was a thrill. He'd given me a little heads up. I had endorsed him very early, helped him recruit other members of Congress to endorse him, campaigned in 12 states with him and for him. He was my candidate, even when Hillary Clinton, who I liked and respected so much, worked with her and her husband, President Clinton, and my time in Congress. But I just had this gut feeling that Barack Obama could be a game-changing president. So endorsed him early. We were about 19 points behind and $100 million behind in fundraising. He won. He came to me after he won, and he said, look, I've got a couple different positions that I'd like you to consider, a cabinet level position, and then some ambassador positions. He mentioned India, and I said, how important is India going to be in your foreign policy? And he said, Tim, it is going to be the pivotal country in my foreign policy. I am shifting to Asia because that's where growth in the world is going to be. And India is going to be the cornerstone of my policy. So I said, one more question, Mr. President. I've worked with the State Department before. It's very bureaucratic. Can I call you or the vice president your national security advisor to help expedite getting things done, because I want to do things. I don't just want to be an ambassador. I want to get things done. And so he said yes, and I accepted. And it is a phenomenal job, Rich. It is 1.4 billion people who live there. It's a democracy, so they share our values of voting in elections. It's a place of unbelievable beauty and unspeakable poverty that'll break your heart. It is a place of contrasts in so many ways. It is a place of federalism and a republic with about 30 states. We have 50 in the United States, each one of them very different. So I tried to visit every one of them. And the president said to me, I want you to get to places, Tim, to show America that we are different and we care about everybody. Don't just be friends with the prime minister and business leaders and parliamentarians. I want you to go to the poorest villages where no ambassador has ever been before and fly our colors there, so they know what America stands for. So we had this massive outreach campaign in India to go to places where no US, Russian, Chinese ambassador had ever been. It really helps when you're doing that kind of thing diplomatically to then go to the government and help America get things done in our interests. So it was a phenomenal job in so many different ways.
Tune in next time for part 2 of Richard Gordon's conversation with Tim Roemer here on Unconventional Times. You've been listening to Unconventional Times with your host, Richard Gordon. Check out all of the episodes of Unconventional Times on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Richard Gordon and all of his unconventional conversations, head on over to unconventionaltimes.com. Thanks for listening.